Hey, everybody. Hope you had a great Labor Day weekend. Got a real special prize for you today. We're going to run the full, you've seen clips of it if you followed the show, but you're going to listen to the full Rod Carew interview, and my goodness, every minute of it's worth it. But I'm going to take the honor and have the honor and do the honor of introducing Mr. Carew as how he should be introduced. 328 career average, which is top 10 all time. Again, over 24,000 players in the big leagues. There's not 10 better hitters than this guy. 3,053 hits, 7 batting titles, 18 all-star games. Rod Carew did not play high school baseball. Let me just let that sink in for you young men out there. Signed as a free agent in 1964, hit 292 with 51 RBIs, made the all-star team his rookie year in 67, won the rookie of the year. Next year, he hit 273 in what would be the last year for the next 15 that he would hit under 300. He would hit 300 or better in the next 15 seasons. Won his first batting title in 69, hitting 332, helping the Twins win the inaugural AL West crown. He was hitting 366 the following year in 51 games in 1970 before a knee injury forced him to miss 3 months. He hit 307 in 71. And then in 72, 73, 74, and 75, he won the batting title. Missed it in 76 by .002. The next year, he had his best season win, his MVP. He was the first guy that, in my memory, who challenged the Ted Williams 400 mark. He was hitting 390 something late in the year. Ended up hitting 388, 128 runs, 100 RBIs, won the MVP. I think he had 15 or 18 home runs, career high in home runs that year. Followed that up with a slumping 333 in 1978 to win his 7th batting crown. And then was traded to the Angels prior to 1979. Spent 7 years in California, moved to first base from second base in California, helped them to win 2 titles, 79, 82, and then hit 294 in the ALCS for them. Stayed active through 1985, reached the 3,000 hit milestone, becoming just the 16th player ever to do that. 1991 was duly elected to the Hall of Fame, and another epic failure by the righties. He failed to receive 100% of the vote. But let me just tell you, you're getting ready to watch a man full of class and integrity and dignity, and hear him tell some of the coolest stories you've ever heard. So enjoy the interview, guys. So first off, you know what? Thank you so much for taking time. I really appreciate it. I was born and raised in the 70s. I was a National League guy. I was a Pirate guy. But some of you guys were so good, you transcended leagues, and you were certainly one of them. I'm curious to know, I guess one of the things I kind of ask guys nowadays, the modern day game and the changes in the approach as to hitting. I look at it and think, my goodness, I'd love to be pitching today because everybody swings and misses. And back when you played, not a lot of people did. Give me some impressions on the modern day player and how hitting has changed.
Well, I hate it. I hate to see all the strikeouts. I used to get upset at myself when I struck out and I had to, lug that lumber back to the dugout because I hated that. And I see guys are striking out 200 times a year today. They might hit 25 home runs, but that's not beneficial to the club. But, it's all about hitting the ball out of the ballpark. They're taking a lot of these kids, and I think that they're ruining these kids. And a lot of them aren't going to stay around in the big leagues for a long time because they're doing what they're not supposed to be doing or not capable of doing. And I see it every day. I've gotten to the point that I don't even watch baseball anymore, and I love baseball.
I can't either.
I watch the Twins because I still work for them.
Right.
And I can give them some insight into some of the things that the kids are doing. But to say, go from channel to channel and watch different games, I don't do that anymore. It's just you see the same things over and over.
It's hard to watch.
It is.
And
it is.
you know, I always looked at, people always talk about, who was the guy you'd least want to face. And I always tell people you were a sabermetrics Bill James guy long before those things existed, because you understood your job as a hitter was to get on base. Didn't matter how. And one of the things that I always keyed on early on in my career was, listen, you show me a guy that strikes out 100 times a year, and I'll give you a game plan to get him out. I don't care how many home runs he hits, but if you strike out 100 times, you have holes in your swing.
Definitely.
I did not want to face the guys who punched out 30 times a year, because I couldn't make them swing and miss. And, guys like Tony Gwynn and some of the smaller, and it was always the smaller guys in the game, because you had to fight your way to the big leagues. And if you were small, you had to hit. And watching you growing up, and I idolized Roberto Clemente. My dad was a Pirate fan, and I know you didn't play in the National League, but I'm sure you ran across him.
And I watched him a lot.
I would love to hear anything you have from an impression perspective of Mr. Clemente.
Well, Roberto was the kind of player that all Latin players looked up to, because he always had a good word to say about how you should dress, how you should look, how you should behave yourself, and don't take anything for granted because you're a Major League Baseball player.
Yeah.
The respect part to him was the most gratifying thing to a young player. And, when I met him my second year in Houston during the All-Star game, Tony Oliva walked me over and introduced me. And he told Roberto, this young man's going to be a star one day. And right away, he started telling me the things and the way to carry myself.
Yes.
And so I learned from that. And he also told me, if I'm going to be a star in this league, help take care of the young Latin players.
Yes.
Because they're going to need our help and advice. And hopefully, you'll do them some good. So when I would have a Latin player come to Minnesota, I would always invite him over to lunch or whatever, just spend the time.
Yes.
Before he went to the ballpark, and developed a friendship with him, and tell him this is what the man told me about the way to go about doing this with your kids.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand how much more there is to this life than, the 9 innings we play. And, I always argue, and I argued when I played, people can't understand, and especially the media, they don't understand that I'm an American. I come to the big leagues. I speak English. I speak the native language, and I've grown up in this environment. Kids are coming from Panama, Netherlands, Antilles, the Dominican Republic, and they're living in literally mud huts on Friday. And then nowadays they're coming to the big leagues on Monday with $50 million in their pocket, and nobody's prepared for that. Nobody's and sometimes it's funny. I swore I would never be that bitter old guy yelling at the kid on my lawn, but the respect thing to me is tragic. The lack of respect for the game, and it's not. Listen, I don't. All the goofy stuff that they do after they hit home runs, that's just stupid and whatever. I get but
you know what, Curt? Curt, you know what? To me, that's a lack of respect too.
I agree.
Because if they played when we played, they would understand that they can't get away with all that crazy stuff.
Well, can you imagine standing in the box and watching a home run off Bob Gibson?
Oh, I'll tell you a story on Bob Gibson real quick. Being a rookie, I was playing a game against him in spring training in St. Petersburg. Tim McCarver is catching. And I'm trying to cover up this hole where my left foot goes. And Gibby is yelling at me from the mound.
Really?
Get in the batter's box, yeah. And then McCarver looked up at me. I says, Tim, look at this big hole. I can't stand here. He says, well, you better change it. The man wants to go. Gibby threw 4 pitches at me and missed me. And then as I'm walking down the first base, he walked over and he says, don't even try and steal second.
And you didn't.
I didn't. I did because I knew what was going to happen.
Right. But it was such a beautiful time in the game. Like I said, I grew up in the 70s at the height of, when you were just magic to watch. And, I only attended one game in my life, and that was the final game of Roberto Clemente's career when he got his 3000th hit off John Matlack, and then passed away a couple of weeks later in the plane crash. And it was the first time I'd ever seen my dad cry. That was my dad's idol. And, I grew up a Pirate fan, and I met Mr. Stargell one time after he had retired. And it was the only time in my life I've ever been speechless, because I think it was a golden time in baseball. The 70s and the 80s, I think, was real baseball for the last time in a lot of different ways. And there's some things I want to ask you. Toughest pitcher you ever faced?
Rudy May.
Really?
Rudy May hit the ball so well from me that 1 minute it's there and the next minute it's gone.
Yep.
I could never pick the ball up out of his hands because that's the way I used to hit.
Right.
See the ball come out of the hands and then react to it. And he just had me eating out of his hands.
There are so many guys that are pitchers and hitters alike who their toughest guy is not a Hall of Famer. It's some obscure guy out of the bullpen or some fifth starter. What would, obviously you saw him, you played with him, but you saw him as a hitter too. What was it like to face Nolan early in his career?
Oh, the stance that I developed of being low and.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, Nolan did that.
Really?
Because I used to chase his fastball that's up. And 1 minute it's there and the next minute it's gone. And I struck out, I think I'm number 4 on the strikeout list. He struck me out 29 times.
Wow.
I ended up hitting 300 off of him, but I had to make adjustments.
Right.
And so what I would do is I would take like 2 or 3 weeks of extra hitting. And I would sit on a stool that swivel so that I would not get up off that stool, while I made my move to go to the baseball. And when I saw that I could do it consistently and feel good, I tried it in a game against him. And my first 3 at-bats, I got hits. And then the next game I faced him, I got 2 hits. Next game I faced him, I dropped a bunt down and hit a high chopper and beat it up for a hit. But during that at bat, he was yelling at me from the mound, "Stand up, stand up." So I gave him the whole finger going down and said, "No, bring it down," because his fastball still exploded.
Yeah,
but it was exploding down. And since I'm keeping my body down, I was able to handle the ball and hit the ball from right field to left field.
Something I've always wanted to ask you. When I was younger, you were one of the guys that, when we played wiffle ball as kids and stickball, your stance was always, very, in the day and age, very different. And one of the things I took from you, I was a big guy, and when I was young, I could hit, but I loved your flat bat because I always thought that the quickest path to the strike zone was not from here, it was from here. And I could still swing with power, but I just had my hands started flat, and I crouched low because I wanted to be at the top of the strike zone. And I didn't, so in my mind, I never went down for something low or high. I always went down for the ball. And I'm wondering, that flat bat, was it something you always did?
It's a movement that I made so that I could get the bat through the hitting zone, not swinging up, but swinging down. And I would not be a good hitter today because they would want me swinging up, and I just, I couldn't do that. My first year, Bob Lemon, who was the hitting coach for the Twins, I was hitting the ball up the middle into left field and getting base hits. And then he says, "Young man, you have to start pulling the ball." I says, "Bob, I will pull the ball if they give me a pitch." I says, "I will definitely roll over to hit the ball on the ground on the hit and run." But I said, "I'm hitting 500 going the other way.
Right.
Why should I change that?"
Right.
Change that. And he says, "Well, I can't talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
and
said,
and that was the old way though. That I mean, if you, I know you, I didn't see this as much as you did, but the game and coaching was very set in its ways.
right.
And you know, if you didn't listen, it was almost a sign of disrespect.
Yes.
And if you didn't listen, you had better be damn good, because and which exactly what you did. You hit through that, and you know, after hitting 388, I'm pretty sure nobody was telling you to change your approach. But one of the things that I marvel at is in your first 6 seasons, you struck out more than you walked. You struck out 403 times, you walked 209 times. For the rest of your career, you struck out 625 times and walked 809 times. Now, that to me is, I always look at young players, and you know, a lot of guys today say if he is what he is when he gets to the big leagues. And I've never believed that. I've always believed if you get enough minor league time and you learn the game, you can make the adjustments at the big league. You clearly did that. You became a guy who on-base percentage was always a big stat for you, and you were always good at it. But when you started swinging and missing less and walking more, you know, you win the MVP and have one of the most amazing years ever in 77. Did you notice, was that some conscious thing you were trying to do and got better at?
Well, it's something that I worked at, because when Mr. Griffith brought me up to the club, he said, you know, we've got 5 or 6 guys that are going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. What I want you to do is to get on base and steal some bases and score runs.
Right.
And so that made me discipline myself more, because when I before they signed me, I was more of a power hitter. So now I had a different job to do. And so I said to myself that I was going to work at this every day. So I took extra batting practice at least 5 days a week.
Right.
Because I knew I had to, you know, work hard,
right,
to do what I'm supposed to do to help the club. And it just became easy after a while that, you know, I see the ball and I know where I'm going to hit it, because any movement I see where the ball is going away, I had an idea right then that I can hit this pitch up the middle, or
right,
take it to left field, or hit it down the left field line.
right,
You know, I didn't try to pull it, because I knew if I pulled it, I was going to roll over
right.
and hit a weak ground ball to the second baseman. And so I really just disciplined myself to, you know, doing the things I knew I was capable of doing.
Well, I always think too that and I'm sure you know this as well. I always found that guys that end up being very good to great players, the first skill they have is they understand their tool set.
Right.
They know what they can do, what they can't do, and they'll work. You know, I always marveled at the guy who worked at his weakness rather than worked at his strength.
Right.
And you know, I played with some of the greatest hitters that ever lived, and you know, Manny Ramirez was he was just an artist to watch. But the guy that I when I think of you, the guy that I think of is Tony Gwynn. And
right.
And I say to people, and they don't understand this, but it's said with complete respect. And I would compare it, you would be the same way. There were some guys that were so good, they were easy to pitch to. Because now, what it was Tony was going to hit the ball where you pitched it. And he wasn't going to hit it weakly. He was going to put the barrel on the ball. So in my mind, I said, okay, I'm not going to make him swing and miss. So I'm going to move my left fielder in, I'm going to move my center fielder over, and I'm going to stack the left side of the infield, because he's going to hit it that way. I can't stop him. I just have to hope he hits it at somebody. And when Tony got heavier at the end of his career, I was grateful, because he ended up being a guy, when he was young, he was like you. A single wasn't a single. If I wasn't good on the mound holding runners, it was a double.
Right.
And you know, that approach of hitting, and I always wondered about guys like you that hit to the level you did. Did you have a favorite park to hit in?
Yeah, I had the old Met in Minnesota, because they had a great background.
Yeah,
you could see the ball well, and even the visiting players, they came in and they might be hitting 220, and then they leave and they're hitting 280. And I always wondered about that. So I asked the guys, I says, how come you hit so well at our park? I said, this has the best background that a hitter needs to see the ball, you know, day games especially. So yeah, the old Minnesota Twins park was the park that I enjoyed hitting in more. than
And
any
there
other
were
place.
there were always parks you felt more comfortable in the batter's box. Same way with me on the mound. There were places where I felt really comfortable on the mound, and places where I felt like I was in jail on the
Yeah.
mound. And I would assume the hitting was the same way. I want to ask you. I would like to get a couple names from you. Best players you ever played with, or saw, or played against.
Tony Oliva, who was a miracle maker, and we roomed together for about 11 years. George Brett, who I thought was a heck of a player, and he could do everything on the field.
Yeah,
Um, you couldn't get him out.
he had a stance like you too.
Yeah. I talked to the hitting instructor, and he always asked me why I kept my bat like that.
Right.
And I gave him a little explanation. Then the next year, Al Cowens, Freddie Patek, George Brett, they were all hitting
Hal
with that
McRae.
flat.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Another guy was the guy that you played with that I admired as a player was Larry Ball.
Oh, God.
Hot-headed, and but when he was out there, it was all about playing the game and winning the game.
He had to be a nightmare to grow up with. He had the reddest ass of any coach I've ever been around. Still does to this day.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also why he was who he was. That's how he got to the big leagues.
Right.
And he would pick a fight with anybody and let Vukovic fight it for him. But and you said something. This is not something people talk about. But it's something that is a dramatic. I can't even imagine it. You had roommates in the big leagues.
Right.
Like when I came up in the minor leagues, we had them for a couple of years, but then never. We never had roommates in the big leagues. And I can't even imagine that lifestyle change and difference.
Well, it was nice to have a roommate because if you have a tough day, you can go back and
right.
Tony and I would talk until wee times in the morning, and we just talk about the game, what he saw. We went out and we bought a little Bell and Howell camera, and we would film each other from the bench. Yeah.
Oh,
then we go back to the hotel, take
awesome.
the sheet off the bed, and put it up as our screen, and we would watch ourselves hit.
Yep.
And then we'll critique it. I didn't do much critiquing. He did most of the critiquing because I was the young gun back in those days. But I was able to play with some great players, guys that knew how to play the game, who loved the game, and went back to the hotel after the game and talked about the game.
I can't get out because it was so. I mean, on all the good teams I played on, we found a guy's room to go to. We would congregate because we always wanted to be together and have fun. And that was on the winning team. On the losing teams, I didn't want to see anybody till the next day, and we got to the ballpark. And so I can't even. I don't know that I can explain to people how different that lifestyle. That's such a dramatically different lifestyle than the players live today. Because all of them have suites in their contract. They live by themselves. They bring their entourage on the road.
Right.
Your entourage was your 24 teammates.
That's it.
And
because we weren't like ready to leave the ballpark right away after the game was over. Yeah. And I noticed that when I became a hitting coach for the Angels, by the time I would get upstairs after straightening out the little room downstairs, guys were 5 minutes and they're out.
Yeah.
They're walking down the hallway because they're going home. And I couldn't believe that.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was with the 93 Phillies, the training room was the post-game breakdown session. Dutch and the leaders all sat in there with their ice all over their bodies. And as you walked in, you got your review for the day. And it was either, hey, come here and sit down, need to talk to you, or hey, good job. Now forget about it. Tomorrow's a new game. But that you can see along all of those things have changed. And I don't think any of those things are for the better, because I grew up in a clubhouse. That's what people understand. We spent more time with our teammates than our families during the baseball season.
Yeah, and you learned a lot too.
You did. Let me ask you about another player, a man I played for, a man I idolized, who was a red ass himself. I still believe he's the most underrated Hall of Famer in baseball history, Frank Robinson.
Oh, when Frank came over from the National League, I used to watch him because he did the little things on the field that I used to say to myself, this guy is a home run hitter. And here he's trying to move or run by hitting a soft ground ball to second base.
Yep.
And I learned from him how to play the game. And after that, I said, if he can do this, I can do it. I can drop a bunt down and move the guy or get a base hit.
Yeah. I remember I played for him when he was managing in the Orioles, and I'll never forget. Sometimes great players don't translate into great managers. And I think one of the reasons for Frank was he could not understand. How can you not hit a ground ball to the right side with a runner on second base? And it was like, okay, and you'd think to yourself, Frank, it's not actually that easy. But in his mind, that was like, of course you can do that. And he could,
because it's the pitch.
Right.
It's the pitch that you have to look for to be able to do that.
Yep.
And looking ahead, that's what's happening today in the big leagues. Start the runner off at second base and don't bunt him over. Guys leave him there. And how many ways can you score from third base with no out, one out, which puts some pressure on the other club?
Right.
And I get irritated.
Right. And putting the ball in play to the right side doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make an out.
Right.
Right.
It could just go through the hole, you get a hit, and you get the guy, around scoring a run or ending up at third.
Let me ask you about something else that would be I think I'm interested to hear what you think or how you would approach this. I never was worried about the infield shift as a pitcher, because in my mind, I would tell my defenders, I set my own defense, because I said, listen, I'm going to pitch it here. He's going to hit it here. I want you to be here. I always looked at the shift as, hey, you know what? I know it's not easy, but you got to learn to hit against it. Now, the only guy I ever saw succeed was Ted Williams. He hit against the shift, and he didn't care where anybody was. But hitters today, and the shift rule changing, was because hitters weren't adjusting or couldn't adjust.
Because they didn't work at it.
And that's my exact thought. That's exactly how I feel, because they could have done it when you played, but your spray chart was line to line. And right. And so you can't shift against the guy who can hit the ball from left field line to right field line.
Well, you shift, I shift.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. Good. That's what good hitters. I always said, listen, if you bunt 4 times against the shift, they'll probably stop shifting.
That's right. That's true.
Can you imagine if you had the entire left side of the infield open on a shift? You would have hit 400. You might have hit 500. But they would have stopped.
Right. Yeah. They would have been playing like regular infield, not a pull
exactly
infield.
Right.
So
I want to ask you about your MVP season. So you said you came up a power hitter. You hit 14 home runs twice, and that was your high. I always felt like, and you didn't hit cheap ones either. You hit when you got a pitch to hit a home run, you drove the ball, but it was something you opted to not try to do. I think your home runs were a result of guy makes a mistake, I'm going to kill it in the pitcher's count.
And sometimes I hit a couple on hit and run because I stayed on top of it.
Yeah. That's but you the 77 season you did it all. You were, I don't remember the latest date you were at 400, but was it something in your mind as the season? Because listen, I'm a player. I knew my statistics. That's what dictates your paycheck. So it was never a selfish thing, but you couldn't help. You couldn't help. They had to be asking you about it every day. And was it a good thing or a bad thing for you?
It was a bad thing for me because I tried to set some rules that I got to the ballpark early. And if you want to interview me, please show up early, because once I start getting myself ready for the game, I don't want to talk about trying to hit 400.
Right.
I want to have my game head on for the game.
Right.
And so I went to Gene Walk and I told Gene Walk, I said, Skip, would you help me out this way? When the writers come in, tell them they can either talk to me now, but close to game time, he's not going to talk to you, and I don't want him to talk to you because I want him ready mentally, for the ball game at hand. And he did. He really helped me out.
And I think that's been a shift. And I always commented on about the fact that, on the days I pitched, I didn't talk to anybody other than my catcher and my infielders and my pitching coach. And it was never, I was gruff and I was surly about it, but it was never like an intimidating thing. I was getting paid to win, not pitch. Right. And I always took that as I played with guys who knew they were getting paid to pitch. And for me, when the money I'm making, you're paying me to win ball games. And this is how I know best to do it. Now, if that upsets other people, tough. I don't care about that.
I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Right. Exactly right. Because it took a lot of mental preparation to go out on the mound and have pitching be the only thing on my mind.
Right.
And that was, and from a game plan perspective, as a hitter of your caliber, I mean, I learned from Tony Gwynn. I'll never forget this. Tony Gwynn went 5 for 5 one night, and I was pitching the next day. And in the paper afterwards, he said to the media, well, I knew everything he was throwing before the game started. So, I got the pitches that I wanted in the counts I wanted them in. And I'm thinking to myself, I got no chance of getting this guy out there. But I took that in reverse and said, listen, if I can find a guy's holes and exploit them, then I only need to get 10 or 12 outs a game instead of 27 because the other ones are gimmies.
Right.
And, that you were in a day and age, like you said, the film thing you talked about, to me, that's just fantastic because that's where, as a player, you'll find any edge you can. I don't, and I took my notebook on the bench and I was writing notes and people would look at me like I had 3 heads, but that's all I knew. And you do what you know. And all those silver sluggers behind you are a testament to the work. And
what, you just said about your little black book. I went into Yankee Stadium. We had a 3-game series. Catfish Hunter was on the mound that night, and Thurman Munson was catching. So this was a Saturday. The day before on Friday, I'd gotten a couple of hits. So as I'm standing by the cage, he's going down to the bullpen to wait for Catfish. He says, "How many are you going to get tonight, big boy?" I said, "I don't know how many I'm going to get, but I'll tell you about one at bat, and I'm going to just amaze you and play with your head a little bit." He says, "What do you mean by that?" I says, "Wait until my second at bat." So I went up to the plate, and he's untying my shoe and throwing dirt on my legs and the whole works. Ron Luciano is on behind the plate. And Thurman says, "Well," I said, "I tell you what, I'm going to call every pitch. I'm going to yell it out just before he releases it." And then Luciano looks at me and says, "Can you do that?" I says, "Yeah, it's a piece of cake." So the first 2 pitches he threw me was fastball down and in, slider down and in. And so I called both of them. And Thurman says, "With that fun stance you got to be peeking. You got to be able to see my sign." I says, "No, man, I wouldn't do that." So he goes out to Catfish, and he was going to tell Catfish to knock me down. So he comes back, say, "We're going to deck you on this next pitch, and maybe the pitch after." I says, "No, he's not going to do that." He says, "He has respected me as a player for the years that I've faced him, and I've respected him. I've never shown him up, nothing." So now here comes the third pitch. And as he releases, I said, "Fastball away, double down the left field line." Fastball away, double. I hit double down the left field line. I'm on second base. and all you could see was Luciano giving me the, you know. So the next day, Thurman comes in. He says, "How'd you do that, man?" So I pulled out my little black book, and for all the time that I've faced catfish, it was the same pattern. So I knew what I was getting.
Yeah.
And that's why I could, he said, "I got to get one of those black books." Said, "Yeah, maybe it might help you out a little bit."
Well, and yeah, that was the thing that the greatest players were always the hardest workers. They, everybody talks about the greatest players being the most talented. No, the greatest players are the hardest workers. They put the most time. So
yes, definitely.
Mr. Carew, listen, this has been an absolute honor for me. I've been a lifelong fan. I'll always be a fan. Congratulations on a Hall of Fame life, not just a Hall of Fame career, but a Hall of Fame life. And God bless you, my friend. And I wish you many, many healthy and happy years ahead of you.
Thanks, pal. When Larry was coaching with me at the Angels, he was trying to get you over there with us for the longest time, and he never could.
I just saw him this weekend.
Yeah.
Still as angry as ever.
Yeah.
But
the next time you see him, say hello for me.
I will do that, my friend. I will do that. Okay. God bless you. Take care of yourself.
Okay. God bless you too,
all right,
buddy.
sir.
Okay.
Okay. I told you. I mean, how cool was that? I mean, the stories, the Nolan Ryans, I mean, all of it. All of it is just gold. That's Rod Carew. And I could have done that for another 2 hours, by the way. Grab our podcast anywhere you can find your podcast, guys. At OutKick, we'd like you to find it at OutKick. If not, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you find your podcast, spread the word. We'll be back on Friday, Bill, with more. Season's winding down. We are headed into the dog days. Waivers are done. Teams are set. If you're Atlanta, pray for a month of no injuries and get to the postseason. Everybody else is going to be battling their butts off. So have a great week, guys.